Hi, everybody. Eve Harow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. And I'm sitting now with a new friend, I think of a lot of people, called, his name is Sam Solomon. And in his own words, how he describes himself, he's a shtickle of everything. So for those of you who don't quite know Yiddish, it means that he's an eclectic person who's involved in a whole lot of things. And I thought, perfect for this show and for my listeners who like to hear about a whole lot of things. So, Sam, thanks so much for joining me today. I know you're in the middle of many, many projects. I appreciate you carving out the time.
My pleasure, Eve.
Okay, so I see we're sitting here in your office, in your home here outside of Jerusalem. World Trade Center litigation, Time Magazine, 2003. I didn't expect to see that when I walked in. I knew about a lot of the other things you're involved with Christians and sovereignty, women's sovereignty, all these things having to do with Israel, and I keep running into you at wherever I am. What's the World Trade Center connection?
Yeah, it does feel like ancient history. So I was a jury consultant in my prior, not jury as in Jewry, but as in jury, Jury. And the jury consultant basically helps law firms and lawyers think about their cases. Most people think of it like the movie. There's a show out there in the States now called The Bull or Runaway Jury, where the guy literally is tampering with the jury. I didn't do that, but basically what we do is help attorneys think about their case theory, how they want to present it, their graphics, dealing with their witnesses, and also part of it is what they call jury deselection. So I owned a jury consulting firm and graphics firm in New York. It was called DOAR. Still exists today. You can look it up, doar.com. I have no financial interest in it at all. And I built this company from scratch with a couple of partners to provide these services to major law firms. One of our clients was Wachtell Lipton, one of the most prestigious and profitable law firms in America. And Herb Wachtell had a relationship with Larry Silverstein. And so when the World Trade Center was destroyed, Larry went to Herb Wachtell and asked Wachtell Lipton, which usually does not do trials, to work on this case. And I worked on both matters. Basically, the question was, what's the insurance coverage? Look, in the end, it gets down to money, right? So the question is, how should the money be recovered for the destruction of the World Trade Center from the insurance carriers due to the attack of Al-Qaeda? Of course, Al-Qaeda doesn't have insurance. That would have been interesting. But the buildings had insurance. They had essentially $3 billion of insurance on the two towers per occurrence. And the question was, were the attacks of the planes one occurrence, i.e., Osama bin Laden sitting in a cave thinking about this, and hence it's worth $3 billion, or is it two buildings, two planes, two attacks, and it's two occurrence, or $6 billion? Actually, I take it back. $7 billion was $3.5 billion per occurrence, so that would have been $7 billion. And I was the jury consultant and trial strategist on this case, and the pictures you're looking at are the pictures of the lead trial lawyers. The most prestigious fellow was Bernie Nussbaum down below, who was the personal attorney for Clinton, Bill Clinton, during his impeachment, his personal legal work. So
so Larry Silverstein was the owner of the buildings for those of us, because as you said, it's history.
99, he was almost like working with the Lands Authority here. He had a 99-year lease from the Port Authority for the building, so hence he essentially controlled the building, and he was responsible for any damage to the building, and he would have to rebuild, but he didn't have enough money without the insurance. So it was critical to build the Freedom Tower that we could prove, which we did in the end, to the jury that this was two occurrences and not one occurrence for the purpose of insurance, and hence is one of the biggest recoveries in the history of the Southern District of New York. Now, the postscript to this is what this case was really about was people's perceptions about terrorism. Because if you thought this was a one occurrence, and most New Yorkers were split 50-50 between one occurrence and two occurrence, they were saying to themselves, this must be happening because of terrorism, and hence it's Osama bin Laden one occurrence. So I did a lot of research into how New Yorkers perceive terrorism, and we came up with a theme that said you can believe one or two occurrences for terror, but this is about insurance, not terror. Why was this important? Because I support an organization here among our many activities called Shurat Adin, Nitzana. And Shurat Adin is an extraordinary organization. It's trying to attack the financial sources of terror because in the end, terrorism all comes because there's money. Without money, they cannot conduct terror. And so there were, in the beginning, I think 11 families that sued for personal injury and wrongful death in the Southern District of New York in front of Judge Thomas for their wrongful death and injuries from the Second Intifada. Okay, it's called the Sokolov case. That was the first name on the demand. That case languished for almost 14 years. Now, it turns out there is a law passed by Congress that says if you're an American citizen and you're injured or killed due to a terror attack, and by the way, terror is a very simple definition. We don't have to get existential leave. It's very simple. It's an attack against civilians for a political purpose. So if you attack civilians for a political purpose and an American citizen anywhere in the world is killed or injured, that American citizen's family, or the person himself, if he or she's still alive, can sue in federal court in the states as long as there is some way you can show that that organization that you're suing has some presence in the United States, which the Fatah and the PLO and the had that presence, and the Palestinian Authority during that time. So
just for my listeners who don't know, what we call the Intifada, which is uprising, but it really was much more than an uprising. It was a terror wave, and we've had quite a few of them in the early 2000s, of Palestinian Arab terrorism against Israelis and against Jews. And it's that to which you refer.
For example, I'm sure people who may remember the Sbarro explosion. So different people were killed and injured in Sbarro. We didn't have all the victims, but a number of them some were Israeli citizens, some were citizens of other countries. But for the American citizens, so Sokolov, I believe, was injured near the Sbarro. And so these were during the Second Intifada, which was from the years about 2000 and 2001 to 2005. The excuse was Ariel Sharon going on to the Temple Mount, which all our Jewish and Christian listeners should understand that the Temple Mount is a trigger point, not because the Jews are misbehaving, but because the Muslims want to control that, because it's very important for them from the standpoint of the way they think about their religion, that anything that once was Muslim always is Muslim, Dar el-Islam, and therefore since at one point Suleiman and others conquered the Temple Mount, they considered Temple Mount, even though it's the only authentic, direct, most holy place for the Jewish people, they claim it's the third holiest place, which actually is a big debate within Islam. They say we control the entire Temple Mount.
Well, if you're sitting in Arkansas and you're saying, okay, well, that doesn't apply to me, have no fears. I mean, you should have fears. There's also Harbal Islam, which means the things that have yet to be conquered by Islam, which means the rest of the world. So what we're sitting here and dealing with in Israel, as so many of you know, is that this is the trailer for the movie. And that's why I know that you listen to this show and that you listen to other shows on the Land of Israel Network and as many other shows coming out of Israel as you can, to understand that what we're fighting here is not our fight. It's all our fight. So when Jews aren't allowed to go and pray on the Temple Mount, and by the way, neither are Christians. When I have Christian tourists come up there, they're not praying up there either. It's an issue of we're being humiliated because we're not Muslims, and they control that. So I know you're involved in the Temple Mount, and people need to understand that it's not just like people aren't going there to be provocative. Everybody should be able to pray there, and this is a big issue. But to get back back to like when we were talking before, I turned on the mic and I looked at the picture about the World Trade Center, and you said that actually is one very big reason why you're here today and why you're doing so many of the things that you're doing. That wasn't just another case, as big as it was. That in many ways it was a turning point in your personal life. So please elaborate.
So basically, because of this case, when these victims of the terror attacks sued in federal court, I had started to donate to the nonprofit called Shurat Adin. And by the way, you can donate many ways. It's not always just about money. It's about resources and time and connections. Everyone, right, getting the word out. It doesn't necessarily have to be about money. But my wife and I were giving to them, and I found out about this case, and I said to Nitzana, who's working on the jury on this case, the law firm was Arnold and Porter. Shurat Adin doesn't actually try the cases. They bring in a law firm to do it. And I found out they were not doing any work in the area of jury consulting, trial strategy. And I ultimately took on this case pro bono, which means for free. I came out of retirement, and we had a incredibly successful trial involving these victims. It got, by the way, got overturned. There's lots of legal issues, but from the standpoint of the jury, and that got me into a couple of things that I had not fully paid attention. Like, for example, why did the jury get so angry and upset and be willing to in the end award over $225 million with treble damages? This is $1 billion result. Why were they so angry? The reason why they were so angry is because they found out that the Fatah and the PLO and the Palestinian Authority are paying families, even back then, the families of terrorists, as well as terrorists themselves if they're alive, paying them monthly checks. If they worked for the Palestinian police force, they were being promoted and getting pension based on that. So, and the more Jews you murdered, it's only about Jews, by the way, no other type of person would get it. So if you robbed a bank, you don't get these special payments. But if you murdered a Jew, the more Jews you murdered, i.e. the longer your sentence was, the more money you get. Well, at that trial, there was a expert who got up there, even as of 2005, Eve, and testified that they were paying already $55 million a year. Today, it's, I believe, close to 300, something in that vicinity.
Itamar Marcus of Palestinian Media Watch has done a lot of research on that. And you just had recently the Netherlands not giving money now to the Palestinian Authority because of this. So you're talking close to 15 years ago, this was coming out. And now, though, people are really getting it. And countries, I think, hopefully, are in the United States for sure, saying, whoa, this whole pay to slay would happen with Taylor Force, that whole act. Exactly. This is all based on something that you're already involved with 15 years ago.
Not 15 years. I'm involved with it 4 or 5 years ago. Before it came out, Itamar Marcus actually was supposed to be an expert to testify. They wouldn't let him. Someone else came in to testify instead. But that was an aha moment for me, because I finally got, with the documentary evidence, and here I'm a consultant in the case, but I wasn't the lawyer in the case. I finally understood how it will be impossible to have an arrangement with what's called the Palestinians, or the Arabs living in Judea and Samaria, as long as they don't have a massive cultural change, which they're not willing to have in any way, shape, or form.
This is not a territorial dispute. This is religion and honor and shame and culture and not an ideology and nothing that can be talked out of or compromised on or anything like that.
This is you're negotiating with yourself, and that's the whole, and that's and that's very much the Arab. This is not Islam. This is about the Arab culture that actually tries to wear you down that way with negotiations. That was the aha moment. So when I finished that case, I first of all got very much hooked on what was going on with the NGOs, with the legal work. NGOs mean non-governmental organizations. I started to look at who was funding these terror organizations through an organization called NGO Monitor. I started getting close to Palestinian Media Watch. And that then led very quickly to an evaluation that said, what can I do to actually help bring these pro-Israel NGOs together? And that led to a putting together with a fellow by the name of Eran Tubal, an organization called Chetz, which is actually very much below the surface. We're not trying to promote the organization itself. What we did, though, was take between 7 to 8 organizations, and we're now doing Europe as well, which is very interesting, where the CEOs of these organizations get together and they share best practices and that we work on joint projects. And I started this Chetz organization as a platform to help these organizations work better together. So now we have 8 organizations in Israel, ones that you would know, and they have to go through a major vetting process. It's not easy to become part of it because there are donors giving money. And now we just opened up a Chetz in Western Europe between countries, and that's going remarkably well with all types of projects. Yeah, we have the United Kingdom, France, Switzerland, Belgium, Germany.
So you've got pro-Israel NGOs within all of these different countries, I imagine made up of Jews and non-Jews, who are now you're coordinating them to help better work together because Europe is not so simple to be pro-Israel in. And
I'll give you a great one for our both Jews and non-Jewish listeners. So the Norway pro-Israel organization, which is called MIF, there are only about 1,500 Jews in Norway. There are 11,500 members. This is a membership-funded organization. They don't get any money from donors, which I'm trying to now to instill that best practice in other NGOs, that everyone's always chasing philanthropists. I think it's a horrible life. It'd be better if they could make it membership-driven. So this is a membership-driven organization, and that membership-driven organization has 11,500 members, of which only maybe 1,000 are Jews. The other 10,000 something are not Jewish. They're evangelical Christians. The head of the organization is also not Jewish. And that shows you how you can bring together some of the best minds in both the Jewish and the non-Jewish world to really combat anti-Semitism and anti-Israel defamation and boycotts and all the things. Look, let's get to the bottom line. What we all know is that anti-Zionism is basically a form of anti-Semitism. It's not just a form. Anti-Zionism became the basis to reintroduce anti-Semitism back into the world through a back door. Because now you don't have to say, the Jews, you say Israel, but when you go and you firebomb a synagogue, it's obvious that it's not about Israel. It's about Jews, because why go after a synagogue in France or a food place in France?
Or when you pass discriminatory legislation or boycott just one group of people. I don't see anybody boycotting Chinese products because of what's going on in Tibet or Cyprus or all a list of many, many other countries in the world doing much worse things than Israel.
Let's pick the best one. This is the one that, for all those who want to advocate for us, because you're listening to Eve's show because you want to be better informed, right? So here's one that the poster child for how hypocritical and anti-Semitic the pro-BDS, pro-boycott movement is in Europe with the EU and this court decision that she's just referring to is Cyprus. Cyprus is a member of the EU. Turkey illegally invaded northern Cyprus. Then after they then threw out the Cypriot Greeks that were there. They then brought in They took and brought in Turks, moved them from Turkey into Cyprus, which is a direct violation and a population. This was a prior existing country. So this is truly an occupation because they're legally, and that's what just came out with Secretary of Defense Pompeo when he said, you know something, the property, like where Eve lives, she's not in illegal property. It is a disputed issue in terms of what is supposed to happen with this land, but there's no dispute with Cyprus. So how is it possible that the EU courts have gone in there and specifically said you have to label, let's say, Psoko wine, which was the case, and say, parentheses, it's even worse, it's from occupied Palestine. Meanwhile, they're not anything that's grown or produced in northern Cyprus. There's no rule about that, and that is an EU country. That's an EU country, and Turkey is not an EU country. So a non-EU country invades an EU. Can you see how excited I get? Invades an EU country, divides it up, illegally puts their population in it, does an illegal occupation. It is recognized by no countries in the world. Okay, not only that, they're even declaring that around it, 200 miles, is their economic zone to be drilling against the interests of the Greek Cypriot authorities, and you don't hear anything. And what Eve is saying, that is demonization, and that is a distinction being made only about Jews in having to do with Judea and Samaria. And that is what makes it anti-Semitic and not just anti-Zionist.
So before all this clicks, and I see that like now you're just, and I know that you're just head over in all of this. So what were you doing? I mean, you were doing the Jewry and you were living a nice life or, working hard in America. And this was like the moment, and this was the fork in the road for you. Because here we are, we're having this discussion in Israel. And you just showed me your grapefruit trees, and you've been living here for a few years. So this changed your life, this realization that something's off here, or it sat on something else that was already brewing?
So first of all, we encouraged both our kids to move to Israel before us. So we're already at the age of 20 and 21. Both our kids moved, they got married, and we already had grandkids.
They listened to you?
Yeah, actually, they didn't listen to us exactly. We told them where they wanted to move. They didn't move exactly where we wanted to in Israel, but they moved here, and it was great.
Amazing.
Yeah, so first they moved there, and they started having kids. So we were coming here like 6 times a year to see the grandkids. But the big thing that really happened was actually because of Meryl, my wife. My wife's a doc, and a lot of her patients were connected to the loss of the World Trade Center because she had the major insurance for firemen and policemen, for all the first responders. And we lived in Oceanside, Long Island, which is right outside of New York City, where lots of firemen and policemen lived. And they were all part of our extended community. And
Meryl, oh my God, how tragic for you on a personal level.
Meryl was I'm not putting this out there, but Meryl was essentially what you would call almost a secondary PTSD to the event because she spent all her time dealing with them, and it really burned her out. So she two things happened. One is she left traditional medicine, went back and got a degree as a Chinese doctor. Now she's both a Chinese and Western doctor. That's the first thing. And the second thing she said to me, my Hebrew name is Shmuel, or Shmu is my nickname. She said, Shmu, I don't want to live here anymore. I do not feel safe. I want to move to Israel. I want to be with our kids. That's where we have to be. This whole thing with the World Trade Center has made me feel very nervous about whether or not the United States, that's before, by the way, Donald Trump was elected, of whether or not, the United States is really going to defend its interests. And so I want to move to Israel. That was actually the dramatic moment, was the loss of the World Trade Center.
Wow. You know, you read, I mean, so many people don't even, it's 2001, it's 18 years ago. That means anybody in college now wasn't even alive when that happened. It's way in the history books. And it's so astonishing for me to have conversations with people. And that was such, you know, I mean, it was an unbelievably huge tragedy, but for so many people, it made a huge difference in their lives. I'm not even talking about, God forbid, the people who lost loved ones there, and that's a whole other realm. But you as side people, but not really side people, because as you said, your wife was so intimately involved with these families who really are never going to get over what happened. But for you, it's a decision then to leave the United States and to come to Israel, which is so ironic because people are always so afraid to come to Israel and don't think about what's happening right under their noses. At least here we're aware of what we're dealing with.
Well, I just read that actually tourism is up in the United States, in Israel, and one of the reasons is that now there's so much terror going around all over the world that people are saying, "What the heck?" That's exactly what I read this weekend in the Jerusalem Post. Yeah. Now, so that's one thing that's occurred. So one was getting involved with pro-Israel NGOs. The other thing is I realized this took a while to get to where Eve is, but I wanted to start to really understand what was Israeli sovereignty, and I was very bothered by the lack, not just the lack of sovereignty in Judea and Samaria and the Temple Mount, but even in the Negev. And I started when I was researching NGO Monitor, and I recommend everyone look at NGO Monitor, NGOmonitor, I think .org.
I had Ann Hertzberg a few months ago. I interviewed her and Gerald Steinberg. They're a great organization.
They're amazing. They're members of my platform, by the way, of Chetz. And if you read that, you just see the amount of effort and time and money it's taken to delegitimize and basically to keep Israel from being true sovereign in the land. And I then met up with Yehuda Katzover and Nadia Matar, and I started understanding what the Women in Green movement was doing in terms of sovereignty. So I am kind of like the nominal chairman of the sovereignty movement, but the reality is I'm just one of the members of the team. It's a flat organization, so I help them. And that then led me to a connection to this fellow, Anthony Abma, who is a pastor from Canada. And he wanted to get involved in sovereignty because he felt the Christians should be more involved in the biblical promises. As I like to say, King David never stayed at the David Intercontinental Hotel on the Tel Aviv beach. He stayed in Hebron. He stayed in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem. And so the promises to the Jewish people for Judea and Samaria, it's not just the heartland, it's the core, it's the soul of the Jewish people and of our connection to the land and the necessity of sovereignty. So we started an organization called Return, O Israel. You can look it up on the web. So return, the word return, the letter O, and Israel with no spaces or dashes, returnoisrael.org. And that organization is to bring together Christians and Jews to support the sovereignty movement. And in fact, your son-in-law is very involved and is a trusted advisor and friend. He actually helped us build the website. So if you want to see his great skills, you can see it on the website. And the idea is to bring Christian Jews together in this way because sovereignty, whether it's the Temple Mount or whether it's Judea and Samaria, is a critical aspect of what is really the identification of the Jewish people. And you can just see again with this announcement of Mike Pompeo, the forces of darkness want to do nothing more than to discredit any ability for us to have any land that is part of our underlying heritage connected to the state of Israel. In fact, everything is being done to try to delegitimize that they're settlers. Think about what Eve's called a settler. What I mean, you're not from there, and what are they called? Settlements. They're not settlements. They're communities. They're real communities. I just saw, by the way, International New York Times this weekend published an interview with Bret Stephens, who used to be one of the good guys. Now he's equivocating, but that's not the point. The point is he was talking about actually Trump's announcement was a good announcement. He usually doesn't agree. What's the picture? The picture is a picture of some area. They didn't even say the name. It says settlement in occupied Palestine. So what the editors did was stick their meme, their occupation thing into the photo because they couldn't affect the op-ed of Bret Stephens, so instead they stuck it in the photo. But here's the best part of the photo. First of all, it's a big Israeli flag. It looks like, we're obnoxious, and there's nice house. But right there, there's Arab neighbor homes next to them. They don't even mention it. It's all a community. The whole thing is a farce. The one thing I suggest, from my perspective, is obviously come visit the country, see for yourself. See what type of an amazing, crazy, democracy we are, with all its positives and all its challenges that every democracy has, because you work in democracy on consensus. And consensus means that things go up and down. It means you can sometimes have delayed elections. It means things are complicated and frustrating. On the other hand, we're an amazing democracy where people really have the ability to do what's important in their lives, the pursuit of life and happiness. That's why we're so alike to the United States. The key ingredients of our country, of what makes us what we are, that Judeo-Christian ethic, are exactly the same instruments that are used in the United States. And it's a very important, and I don't feel guilty about being an American. I'm a military brat. My father served 24 years in the American Air Force, so I feel completely proud of my role in the United States. I feel completely proud of being an Israeli and a Jew, and there's no one has to hang their head even a slight bit ashamed or feel attacked or inappropriate because of the world claiming something, which of course there is no world, because just also remember, the world just stood by as other things happen all the time. Look at Sudan. I don't have to talk about Jews. Just look what's happening in Sudan, the millions that have been murdered in Sudan. Look what's going on in North Korea. Look what's going on in Iran. Iran was just voted, like 96 to something in the UN as a country that celebrates human rights, just before they shut off the internet and shot and murdered at least 100. We don't even know how many were killed in order to suppress a redo of the Green Revolution. And that's the world. That's the world. If the world, so
there's this obsessive focus on Israel, and you have to wonder. And then when you live here and you just see prophecy come true, like day to day to day to day, in terms of the food that's growing and the numbers of people here and the medical inventions. Again, if you guys don't have it, I think I've mentioned it before, and I need to interview Michael Ordman, who just puts out a good news newsletter. You cannot believe what this country is accomplishing. So on the one hand, it's such a whirlwind of great things happening, and on the other hand, just a focus of people in the world who are saying that we are just the most evil thing ever. And you have to wonder what on earth is going on. But if you believe in God and you believe in a bigger picture, then you do understand what's going on. And Sam's totally correct. But you have to come here and visit. You have to look around, see for yourselves, and educate yourselves as much. And if you can't do that, or even if you have done that, continually educate yourselves on what's happening. But more than that, make a difference. And you're an example of somebody who is making a difference, and everybody can do it. You don't have to have $1 billion in the bank, and you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to feel like it's always about the philanthropy, inviting speakers in, like myself or others. No, but really, and making sure if you're sitting on the fence, then you're on the side of the bad guys, because they're not waiting.
So I'm sorry, but actually this is really important, that in the end, persuasion happens in small groups. Actually, usually almost happens one-on-one. And therefore, we need as many ambassadors, as many spiritual and social and community ambassadors. So I'm deputizing everyone that's listening to this program to go out there and spread the word, spread the message, spread the good word. Okay, for those Christians, you understand what I mean. There's a good word for that. There's also a good word for the state of Israel and for the Jews and the promises of the Bible, which is very much connected to the Christian faith. And for the Israelis, for the Jews, just the same thing. Don't be embarrassed of your Judaism. Be very open to the opportunities to have conversations. Be proud to say, I support Israel as a Jew in a progressive environment, like in a campus.
Oh, now you're really asking that for something. There's a real fear environment. It's so crazy because, we talk about how the communist societies, and we know a lot of Russians, Soviet, people from the former Soviet Union who've moved here, and people from the Arab world, that they live in fear societies, meaning that they can't say what it is they actually want to say because there'll be some kind of retribution. But then I'm not so sure that like the campuses in the United States and in Europe haven't turned into some kind of microcosm of a little fear society where if you want to be cool, you want to be accepted, you want to be in, you can't say anything pro-Israel. And that is incredibly upsetting. So if someone wants to see what you're up to, because you've kind of brought a whole lot of pieces together, what's the website? And then they can go, you have a particular website, and then they can go and they can see different organizations' works?
I actually don't, I haven't thought of that. That's a great idea. That's more work for me. No, I haven't done that. I mean, you could look at my resume.
Just as a platform to spread it out to other places? Or they have to go into NGO Watch and they have to monitor?
I actually have it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I have a website, www.arizal.biz, B-I-Z. And what I'll do, that's where my resume is. I will put in that first page a list, the link. It's actually buried in my resume, What I will do is I'll pull it out and I'll stick that on first page, and it's going to actually say even Harrow's.
Harrow's wish list of good people.
I'll put it up there. I also just want to mention one other thing. I keep wanting to go back to this thing. I don't ask our Christian friends to sit there all day worrying about anti-Semitism. In the end, it's a problem for our people. We have to deal with it. Your job is to help educate, communicate, and support and stop it. But I have to tell you something, just to think, there is a whole theory that says that anti-Semitism is actually what they call a social virus. It's a contagious virus that is it's transferred from person to person due to social milieu. That's how you could have the Nazis, the German people who were pretty educated and quote unquote, all of a sudden get caught with this like almost a virus and become crazy people and kill off their Jews. It's different by area, but
Well, the Church of England just took responsibility for the fact that the church inculcated a lot of people with that as well. So it depends where and it depends how, but like with a lot of viruses, it can lay dormant and then something pops it out.
So thank you. We didn't even discuss this before, Eve. So where did it lay dormant? This was my great aha the other night because I've been thinking about this. Why is anti-Semitism actually the manifestation of anti-Zionism is the manifestation of anti-Semitism, not like it's a version of it, which is this softening of the edges. It was laying dormant, believe it or not, in the Arab world. What happened in the Arab world around World War II is a whole series of Arab countries. Look, the Muslims didn't like the Jews, but they didn't have that, I would call it almost Nazi-like anti-Semitism. But during World War II, there arose these Ba'athist parties in Syria, in Iraq. They were actually Nazi parties. You should know that the major riots against the Jews in Baghdad did not happen because of Israel. It happened in 1942, okay? So it lay dormant in this as it mutated to a Nazi-like anti-Semitism, and it was waiting for some way, a vector they call it in a virus, to launch out again. And that was the manipulation and use of the Arabs living in Judea and Samaria, which they call the Palestinian thing. And then that was the transport. We're not against the Jews, we're against Israel's occupation. And that then mutated to complete anti-Semitism. If you really listen, I don't even want to use the word. So I just saw a sign, and it said, "Free Palestine, it was in England, F the Jews." Okay? F the Zionists. That's, of course, that's about the Jews. It just used the word Zionist as a substitute word. And anyway, so I just want to make sure, let's not soften the edges. We're in a serious crisis. Anti-Semitism, after 70 years post-World War II, has now come back. Yes, there are strong origins of this from the church. So we really appreciate that our Christian friends are now coming out and saying we overtly support Israel, the Jewish people. We need to have that level of positive energy to mitakein, to fix all the things that have gone on. And now's the moment to meet that challenge.
Right. And as I say to my listeners all the time, to some degree, it's the God people versus the not God people now. And which side do you want to be on? And to some degree, I think it's almost that simple. So, Sam, thank you so much, and for everything that you do. And I'm very honored. Eve Harrow's wish list of the different sites, and that'll be great. And then people can go one-stop shopping, and they'll see these different organizations and what they're doing, and keep informed. And there's a lot of good people out there. But if what they're doing isn't getting read about, it isn't getting passed down, then it's very nice for the academic world, but that's about it. And we have to make sure that it doesn't happen. So thank you so much again. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
I know I'm going to see you like everywhere because we tend to haunt the same places. Eve Harow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network.
Prime Minister Netanyahu,
Benny Gantz, Avigdor Lieberman,
Yair Lapid.
Will the people of Israel have a government soon? Will it be a unity government? Will it be a right-wing government? Will it be a left-wing government with Arab support? Or will we be going to elections on Purim? Find out by listening to Inside Israel